Hello viewers, you are welcome to ABKM Medics. In today's class, we're going to talk about the control of blood pressure. Blood pressure is the force of blood against the wall of the arteries, which can be controlled in two ways, which include the short-term control, which is known as the Baro receptor reflex, and the long-term control, which is through the mechanism of RAS, renin-angiotensin aldosterone system. But today we're going to look at the short-term control of blood pressure. But before we go into the topic itself, let's introduce ourselves to the diagram on the board. Here, this is the human brain. The human brain is made up of two centers responsible for control of blood pressure, and the center are the cardiovascular center, which is responsible for heart rate and heartbeats. While the vasomotor center here is the second center, which is responsible for the control of the blood vessel diameter to determine either to widen or to narrow the blood vessels. Here we have the structure of the kidney. No kidney, on top of kidney we have the adrenal glands, which is responsible for secretion of chemicals called adrenaline or non-adrenaline, which play vital roles when it comes to control of blood pressure. Then here we have the artery. Artery is also part of structure that play roles when it comes to control of blood pressure. Here we have the heart itself. The heart is made up of arc. This arc, on top of it we have a special receptors called the Baro receptors or stretch receptors or aortic sinuses. These receptors, they are very sensitive to either decrease or increase in blood pressure, while also on the carotid artery we also have receptors called the aortic sinuses. They are all called baroreceptors in general. But this specifically is very sensitive to increase in blood pressure. So now, any moment there is increase or any moment there is decrease in blood pressure, this aortic sinuses will detect that. By the time it detects the decrease in blood pressure, it will send message direct to the cardiovascular center and the vasomotor center through the 10th cranial nerve, which is the vagus nerve. These centers will now interpret the message and send down a sympathetic message or impulse to the heart. You know, always sympathetic impulse always initiates. Send a sympathetic impulse to the heart to increase the heart rate, while another sympathetic message to the adrenal gland to stimulate the release of adrenalines. And if adrenalines are released, they go directly into the bloodstream to their receptors found on the surface of the blood vessels. These receptors are of two types. We have the alpha adrenergic receptor and beta adrenergic receptor. We all know the work of these adrenalines to narrow the blood vessels, and their receptors are here. By the time they are released, they bind with their receptors. And by the time they bind with their receptors, they constrict or narrow the blood vessels. And if blood vessels are narrowed, it's going to increase peripheral vascular resistance, meaning the pressure of blood within the blood vessels, which is refers to increase in blood pressure. The same sympathetic nervous system, by the time it increases the heart rate, is going to increase the cardiac output, that is the amount of blood pumped by the heart per minute, then is going to increase the peripheral vascular resistance, which in turn increase the blood pressure, and that is how blood pressure is increased. Then, in turn, if there is increase in blood pressure, since the blood pressure is not increased, the carotid sinuses will detect this and send message to these centers via the carotid sinuses, via the 9th cranial nerve, which is the glossopharyngeal nerve, to these centers. By the time message gets to these centers, there will be interpretation of this message by the centers. This center will now send a parasympathetic nervous system this time, not sympathetic. The work of parasympathetic nervous system is an inhibitory nervous stimulation. By the time the parasympathetic goes to the heart, it's going to decrease the heart rate. And you know, if the heart rate is decreased, there's going to be decrease in cardiac output. And if there's decrease in cardiac output, there's going to be decrease in peripheral vascular resistance, which will bring about decrease in blood pressure to maintain homeostasis. Then the same parasympathetic will be sent to the adrenal gland to stop the release of this chemical called adrenaline or noradrenaline. And this time the same sympathetic will go directly to the blood vessels. On the blood vessels this time, what we want is to dilate the blood vessels. And there is a certain chemical responsible for that. On top of the blood vessels, there are special receptors called muscarinic receptors. These muscarinic receptors, they are receptors where a chemical called acetylcholine binds with. By the time this acetylcholine binds with the receptor, what acetylcholine does is to dilate the blood vessels, and that is how blood vessels get dilated. And if blood vessels is dilated, there is going to be free movement of blood within the blood vessels, which will in turn decrease the blood pressure to maintain homeostasis. This is just brief on short-term control of blood pressure. Next is the long-term control of blood pressure, which we've discussed that in our previous video. You can check our previous videos on mechanism of renin, angiotensin, aldosterone system. So these are the two ways blood pressure are controlled.